Russia, in many ways, is affected by humans in its environmental stance. Russia is located in North Asia and is the largest country in the world, according to land area. Its landscape consists of low-lying plains with high hills. Russia's population is 142,423,773, and its population density is 8.4 people per square kilometer. Russia is currently using 62% of its industrial capacity, and its main industries include machinery construction, chemical and petrochemical industry, fuel and energy, metallurgical complex, agricultural complex, timber, mining, pulp and paper production, automotive industry, and transport industry. Russia's major resources are oil, gas, and coal, which come from the mineral-packed Ural Mountains, and the timber from the vast woodlands of Siberia. Russia's current infrastructure includes 59 projects and $31.8 billion of completed roads, railways, etc. 189 projects in progress with $329.5 billion of financing, and 77 planned projects with $608.1 billion financing. This brings the total to 325 projects and $969.4 billion of financing. Russia's car use has 317 cars per 1,000 people since a survey in 2014, which shows 31.7% of Russians own cars. The types of technology and tech advancements taking place in Russia include aviation, space technology, military, computing, automotive industry, railroads, naval, and nuclear technologies.
One of Russia's worst and largest accidents, the Chernobyl accident, had some of the best examples, yet worst cases of HEI. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was one of the largest and most productive power plants in Ukraine at the time, therefore creating one of the largest disasters of its time, with many long-lasting effects still seen today across Russia and parts of Europe. It had 4 total reactors, with 2 or more being built. Reactor number 4 was the site of the disaster in 1986 and is now within a large restricted area known as the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. The power plant is to be cleaned by 2065. On January 3, 2010, a Ukrainian law, which is now Russia, thanks Putin, stipulating a program toward this objective came into effect. 1986, following the explosion of reactor number 4, approximately 100,000 square kilometers of land was significantly contaminated with fallout. The initial evidence that a major release of radioactive material was affecting other countries came not from Soviet sources, but from Sweden. The evacuation of Pripyat on April 27th was silently completed by the Soviet Union. During this evacuation, the people of Pripyat were given 5 minutes to evacuate the town with whatever personal belongings they could grab. The rise in radiation levels had already been detected in Finland 36 hours after the explosion, but a civil service strike delayed the response and publication. Contamination from the accident was scattered irregularly due to weather conditions, and in some cases this caused radioactive rainfall. This radioactive rain was purposely seeded over 10,000 square kilometers of the Belarusian SSSR by the Soviet Air Force to remove radioactive particles from clouds heading toward highly populated areas. Despite efforts of seeding, more than half particles landed outside Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Studies in surrounding countries indicate over 1 million people could have been affected by radiation. In Western Europe, precautionary measures taken in response to the regulations banning the importation of certain foods, but not others. In France, some officials even stated that the Chernobyl accident had no adverse effects. At the same time, official figures in southern Bavaria, Germany, shown that some plant species contaminated high amounts of cesium, which believed to be passed on to wild boar, which had already contained radioactive particles above the allowed level, and then consumed them. mutations in humans and animals increased, and within the first 4 years of the accident, 350 animals were born with gross deformities such as missing or extra limbs, missing eyes, heads, ribs, or deformed skulls, all occurring on farms of Ukraine. In comparison, only 3 abnormal births were reported 5 years prior. Despite these claims, the World Health Organization stated that children born before or after contamination of the father shown no differences in mutation frequencies.
Like many other releases of radioactivity into the environment, the Chernobyl release was controlled by the physical and chemical properties of the radioactive elements in the core. Dangerous elements released in our fission products, those that accumulate in the food chain, such as iodine, cesium, and strontium. Iodine 131 and cesium 137 were responsible for exposure to the general public. At different times for the accident, different isotopes were responsible for the majority of the external dose. All of the noble gases were immediately released into the atmosphere following the initial explosion. The doses of the gases immediately released, which were calculated, were based on a person standing out in the open.
The Chernobyl nuclear power plant lies next to the Pripyat River, which then runs into one of the largest surface water systems in Europe, the Dnieper Reservoir System. Immediately following the accident, contamination of water systems became an immediate issue. In the most affected areas of Ukraine, radiation levels raised concern, but it was officially stated that the contaminants had settled to the bottom and wouldn't dissolve into drinking water for another 800 to 1,000 years. In addition to this, guidelines for radioiodine were raised, allowing most drinking water to be safe. A year after the accident, it was even reported that Chernobyl's cooling pond was safe to drink from. Despite this, residents of Kiev, large users of the Dnieper system, quickly switched to the Desna River as their source of water. Meanwhile, silt traps were made and an underground barrier to prevent water from the Pripyat River from entering the Dnieper system. Radioactivity in the fish was measured to be too high for consumption, and the guidelines varied between countries. In small lakes, the concentrations in fish varied tremendously. The contamination of fish raised short-term concerns in the UK and Germany, and long-term in immediately affected areas like Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, and parts of Scandinavia. The groundwater supplies weren't severely affected since the contaminants couldn't contaminate the water due to their short half-lives. The contaminants with longer half-lives were more in the soil before they could reach the water. Most and high amounts of contamination were due to the disposal of chemicals off-site, but within the exclusion zone. Directly following the disaster, 4 square kilometers of pine forest downwind of reactor number 4 were turned red and later died. This gained these trees the name Red Forest.
237 people suffered from acute radiation sickness, and 31 people died directly following the accident. Most of these victims were first responders of the accident, completely unaware of how severe the effects would be. In 2005, the Chernobyl Forum published a report on the effects of the accident. Thyroid cancer appeared frequently among the children affected by the radiation directly and through birth by parent contamination. The Chernobyl Forum showed this was the largest effect on children, with over 4,000 reported cases. Up to the year 2005, over 6,000 cases were reported in both children and adolescents exposed at the time of the accident. Thyroid cancer is generally treatable with up to a 92% survival rate after 30 years. According to the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, there has been no increase in the number of birth defects or cancer. However, the risk of thyroid cancer is still high according to the studies by the Chernobyl Forum.
The after effects of the Chernobyl accident are still expected to be seen for another 100 years, although the severity of the effects will decline. Please note that Russia at this time period had the USSR, and therefore all the states of Soviet Russia were, quote, not a part of the accident, until it was scientifically proven where the cause of the accident was, and until then, Russia would deny any involvement. At this point in time, the peak of effects has stopped and is expected to decline from here forth.